Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Finding Psychology Literature and Resources. My name is Ken Frankel. I'll be your host today. I am the head of Instruction and Engagement Services here at the Wimberley Library at the Boca campus of FAU. I'm also, as part of my job, the liaison librarian to the Department of Psychology, as well as the School of Social Work and 5 departments in the College of Education. Joining me here at the controls is my colleague, Christy Padron, who's going to hopefully take any questions that you have on Facebook Messenger. The arrows aren't advancing. A couple of housekeeping matters. If you do have any questions today, you can ask them in Facebook Messenger, and you can send the questions to @FAU Libraries. And that's just a picture of it in the mobile app, and you can use the Facebook Messenger on there as well. If you'd like a certificate of completion after this webinar, there'll be a link that we'll present to you at the end of today's session, and you can complete that. And if you get enough questions right, a certificate of completion will be emailed to you. Another thing you can do during this session, you're viewing the webinar in one browser window on your computer. You can open up a secondary browser, and then when we go into some of the different resources that we'll be looking at today, you can view them in that secondary window and try out some of the things that we'll be looking at. So our objectives for today's session are to, one, become familiar with the FAU Libraries web page and the Psychology Research Guide, which you can access from our web page. We'll take a look at the library's catalog, which is a database where we can search for things in the library, such as books, government documents, DVDs, and other material. The library's catalog will also tell us if we own a particular journal, but it won't give us the individual articles that are found within the journals, and so we'll look at some other databases to find those. We will give a brief discussion about what peer-reviewed journals are, as well as the databases that contain them. We'll talk about creating a search strategy and also give you some tips and tricks for doing searches. And we'll become familiar with the PsycNet databases, which include PsycArticles, PsycInfo, and PsycTests, and what are the differences between these various databases that we get through PsycNet. We will also talk a bit about citing your sources and avoiding plagiarism, and a brief discussion about some of the other library services and facilities that we offer and how to get help if you need it. So the first thing we'll look at today is the library's web page. And I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but we're going to flip into the web page in a moment and look at that. But just briefly, our web page is library.fau.edu. And one thing to keep in mind is that if you are trying to access any of the library's resources from off-campus, there's a link on our web page that says Off-Campus Connect, and you need to go into that and log in. And you only need to do this if you're working from off-campus. And the reason for that is that the various resources that you'll be accessing through our webpage are not information that's being given away for free on the internet. It's information that the library pays a large part of our budget every year to provide online resources that you can access as a student. So these would include things like online journals, databases, streaming video, ebooks, and other kinds of information that isn't given away for free. So when you log in, it'll show these vendors that you're affiliated with FAU, and you'll be able to access the information. So on the library's webpage are several different tabs. There's one called One Search, and that one searches many of the databases that FAU subscribes to in one place. That's not something we're going to spend a lot of time on today. We're going to be more focused on the subject of psychology. So we'll look at the other tabs that include the library's catalog, which I had mentioned earlier is the database where we look for books. We won't spend a whole lot of time on it. And there's another tab that is used to search for a particular journal title. And finally, we'll look at the databases. And again, we'll be focusing today on the PsycNet databases, and in particular, PsycInfo. So what I'm going to do now is go over to the library's web page. And as I mentioned, this is it. And as we look towards the center of the page, a little bit below that, we see that link that says Off Campus Connect. And there's an icon there that looks like a key. And if you click on that, it'll take you to this page. And if you scroll down a little bit on the page, there's a box that says FAUNet ID Sign On. So if you click in that box, it'll prompt you to log in with your FAUNet ID and password. There's another option where you can log in with a number that's on your OWL card below the barcode. It's a 14-digit number, and you can log in with that, leaving out the A at the beginning and the end, and then the 4-digit month and date of your birthday. So we've seen on rare occasions you might not be able to log in with one of these, but you can with the other. So if that happens, try the other option, and then if neither one works, there are phone numbers at the bottom of each of those boxes that you can call, and then we can try to troubleshoot the problem and then hopefully resolve it for you. So going back to the library's webpage, the first tab I'm going to look at today is the library's catalog. So the library's catalog, as I had mentioned earlier, is where we look for things here in the library, such as things like books and other types of information. So if I came into the library's catalog, and let's say I wanted to find a book about depression, I can enter that word here and click on search, and now it flips into the library's catalog, which is a somewhat different interface. And you'll notice up here towards the left side of the screen, it says that we found over 5,000 items that include this word. Now, as we scroll down the list, oh, and also out of the 5,000, about 18 or 1,900 of those are available online. So we do have ebooks, government documents, and other online resources. Now, as I scroll down the list, I can see, so for example, item number 1 is a book. It was published in 1985. Item number 2 is a DVD. Item number 3 is an ebook, or actually a government document, which is also available online. 4 is a streaming video. So there's a variety of different kinds of information that you can get through the library's catalog. By clicking on the title of any one of these items, it's going to give you a little more detailed information about the book. So here we can see how many pages it is. There are also subject headings listed. And here we notice that it does say the subject of this is Depression, Mental, Popular Works. And so I could click on those subject headings to find other items that are listed under that subject. And if I scroll down the list a little bit further, there are other items. So one thing I wanted to mention, though, is that when I did the search initially, you notice the box up here at the top says anywhere. So that means it's finding any appearance of the word depression. And one thing that might throw us off here, so for example, in the history of the United States, there was something called the Great Depression, which was more of a failure of the economy. And so here I'm looking more for psychological depression or mental health kinds of issues. So if I look over here on the side of the screen, on the left side of the screen, it says narrow results by. And so here there are different ways that we can narrow our search results by, including subject or topic. And so if we take a look here, we can see that one of the items is mental depression. depressed persons. Now there's depression and the New Deal, so that's more talking about the Great Depression. That's not what I want. This one that says depressions, well, it's not really certain if that's pertaining to the mental depression or the economic one. So let's also select depressions in old age and in adolescent. And we could look further down the list and see what other things look relevant. We see there's things about financial crises and whatnot. So let's just stick with the ones that we've checked off here, and then we can apply these to the search. And so you see now we've narrowed our results down to 531 items. And again, we have the list of the items. So now we've made our search more relevant because we know now that these are not just the keyword depression, but the subject, and we selected ones that had to do with mental health or psychological aspects of depression. One thing I wanted to mention here is that you'll notice some of these things are streaming videos and ebooks, and it does say on some of them that off-campus access is limited to current FAU students and employees. And if I did want to view one of these things, I would click on that link, and it's going to flip me into the particular database that includes the full, the video itself, which I could then view online. And we can see below it, it's a 55-minute video, so we won't be watching the whole thing today. But I just wanted to show you that these sorts of things are available through the library's catalog. And you can watch those. So we won't actually view this today, but these sorts of things are available to you. There are also things like ebooks that are government documents and other kinds of ebooks as well. You'll notice some of these items are quite old, from the 1970s and even the 1990s. So if we did want to find the most recent items, if we go back up to the top of the screen, you'll notice that towards the upper right it says sort by relevance. Another thing we could do here is click on that drop-down arrow, and then we can go to publication date newest, and now this is going to bring up the most recent items first, and we can see that here are items coming up from 2018 that are newer. A number of these are ebooks as well, and those can be viewed online by clicking on the link. And so I think just to stay on track, I'm not going to actually view one of these right now, but you would just click on the link and you can view these online. So this is just a little introduction to the library's catalog. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is when we entered our search to begin with, we did use the basic search. Now we also have an option for an advanced search. And what the advanced search does is it opens up additional boxes where we can add words and make the search more narrow. And I'll talk more about this a little later, but let's say I wanted something maybe to do with treatment. So we had 5,000 here. If I click on search, it'll narrow it down. Now we're down to 748. So whenever we add additional concepts, it makes our search more narrow. So that's an important thing to keep in mind today. And you know, you could think about different concepts dealing with this. So maybe something like bereavement. Hopefully I'm spelling this correctly. Now we found 53. So adding additional concepts will always narrow your search down. One last thing I wanted to mention about this, the library's catalog, over here on the side, on the left side, it's telling us how many items we found at FAU. We also have a service called uBorrow, where we can borrow things from other institutions in the state. So when I clicked on that link, it's taking me into something called the Florida Academic Library Services Cooperative, or FALSI. And here it's going to list items not just from FAU but from all of the state universities and colleges. And on this page, any item that we see that has this little icon that says you borrow, we can borrow from other institutions in the state. we want to make sure that it doesn't say FAU, like item number 2 here says that FAU has it and it's available. So we wouldn't want to get that through uBorrow. But maybe this one, item number 7, doesn't say FAU. We can see other institutions in the state that do own this particular book. And then if we wanted to request it, we would just click on the uBorrow icon, and it'll then ask us to log in with that number that I mentioned earlier that's on your OWL card, 14-digit number, 4-digit month and date of your birthday. And I won't put mine in right now, but if you do log in, it'll ask you which campus you want it delivered to. So whether you're here at Boca, Jupiter, or Harbor Branch, or I think even if you're a distance learner, we can deliver that item to you. So that is uBorrow. This is in the library's catalog as well. So one thing I wanted to do now, let me just go back to the library's web page again. So that is the library's catalog. Now, there's another tab here that says Journals. And when you see that logically, you might think, well, if I wanted to find journal articles on a subject, this is where I would go to look for them. However, that is not what you would do with this tab. This tab is one that you would use if you knew the name of a specific journal and wanted to find out, is this available in any of the library's online resources, such as databases? It will tell us which database has it and what years are covered. But it's not one that we'd want to search for a subject on, because here we're only looking at basically one journal at a time. So if I was looking for the journal American Psychologist, I can type that in, click on search, and what it's going to do is tell us which database includes the full text of this journal. And so here it's telling me for American Psychologist, this one is found in Psych Articles, and it does go back as far as 1946. And I can click on that link to go into Psych Articles. I can even search for articles within that journal by using that search box, which is right there. We'll look more at Psych Info and Psych Articles in a few minutes. So those are some of the features on the library's webpage. Just to mention also that the webpage will also tell us which hours the library is open. So as you may be aware, we are now open 24 hours a day from noon on Sunday until 6 p.m. on Friday. So this is a test project, and depending on the number of people who show up, we may keep that permanently or perhaps not. So we'll see how that goes. But this semester it is available 24 hours a day, Sunday through Friday evening. Oh yes, and the OWL card is another thing to talk about. So is that if you do come into the library after 10 o'clock at night, you do need to bring your OWL card with you, because we do have a security gate now, and after 10 o'clock at night until about 8 o'clock in the morning, if you come 7:40 in the morning, you need to swipe your card to get in. And this just came about recently. We're trying to increase security in the library. You may remember a few years ago at Florida State University, someone came to the library at night with a gun. And so hopefully we can reduce the incidence of anything like that happening here. We can't eliminate it entirely, but we'll try to reduce the likelihood of that happening. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint for a moment. So again, we talked about these things, and we looked at the library's webpage. So one thing that I didn't show you on the library's webpage is the psychology research guide. So I'm going to flip back over there and show you where this is available. So again, next to the Off-Campus Connect, there's another link that says Research Guides. And if I click on this list, there's a listing of different subjects that the library has guides for that list some of the most useful resources in different subject areas. We don't have them for every class, but we do have them for classes that come to the library for instruction, or sometimes instructors will request one of these guides to be prepared for their class. And we have some of those available online. But what I wanted to show you, if we go further down the list, we do have psychology listed here. And when we click on psychology, we see things like the APA boot camp, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes, and some other psychology-related items such as counselor education, neuroscience, and so forth. There are two things that say psychology, and if you hover over with your cursor, you'll notice this first one says Jupiter, the second one says Boca. So we're going to look at the Boca Raton guide and take a look at what's available to you on here. So basically, looking at these tabs that go across the top, we can see that there's a link to books and other resources, and so this does give you a link to the library's catalog that we just talked about. It lists some selected ebooks that are available to you. They're not all of them. That's just a small handful, a small selection. And I'll save databases for last, but we'll skip over to journals. There's links to some important journals, but again, this isn't all the ones that are available. And if you use that journal search on our website, that will give you a search tool that you can find at any of our online journals using that. These are just some of the important websites that might be useful for a psychology major or faculty member. And these include things like the APA, the National Institute of Mental Health, as well as the Society for Neuroscience, and some other links as well that you can click on. I mentioned in the library's catalog that we have streaming video, so these are also accessible as separate databases. And I'll mention these briefly now. We're not going to go into all of these. So a number of these are dealing with sort of aspects related to things like clinical psychology, counseling, and social work, which at FAU are not really the main thrust of the psychology department. Things like psychological experiments are, and so we do have a database called Psychological Experiments Online. And this one will actually give you video footage as well as text and other information about some of these famous psychology experiments, so things like the Stanford Prison Experiment and the Bobo Doll Experiment. We can find information about these, including some video content. And this was done back in the early 60s, and kind of looked at do children model behavior that they watch. And as you can see, this is actually, they're watching on television someone beating up the Bobo doll. And then they looked at, after the children viewed it, did they do the same thing? And so this, again, is a very famous experiment. The person's name, I think, was Stanley Milgram, who's actually still alive. He's in his 90s. So that may be of interest to you. And there is another one called Jove, which actually has visualized experiments in certain areas, which at FAU include biology as well as neuroscience, and there are a number of people in the Department of Psychology who are interested in neuroscience. Citations I'll come back to later as well. So let's go to databases. So when we talk about databases, what we're looking at is a collection of information which in the case of the library is looking primarily at sources of information such as scholarly or peer-reviewed journal articles. And so we need to, for those who don't know, talk about what does that mean, a scholarly journal article or a peer-reviewed journal article. And We do have in our PowerPoint a brief video that we can look at, and this will give us some information about what are scholarly periodicals. And I'll talk a little bit more about it after we view the video. Is the sound coming through? Okay.
There's a little lag. Check it out. It's coming out in a moment. There is no sound, but
No?
there are.
It's moving on here. It's moving on here. Should I turn it up?
Try it. And an audience. Articles are written at a general reading level, and the purpose is to inform or entertain readers. These articles cover a broad variety of topics such as news, politics, gossip, or sports. They are normally written by journalists who may or may not have subject expertise. Additional features of popular magazines include many advertisements as well as pictures and colorful graphics. Examples of popular magazines include Time, Rolling Stone, and Vogue. Popular periodicals, key points. The purpose of popular publications is to inform or entertain. They cover a variety of topics and are written for the general public. Articles are normally written by journalists and include many colorful pictures, graphics, and advertisements. Examples include Time, Rolling Stone, and Vogue.
Oh.
Scholarly publications differ in many ways from popular ones. They are generally available at libraries. Many are available electronically or in print format. A scholarly publication, such as a journal, is written for students, professionals, or researchers. These publications cover academic disciplines and delve into specific topics within a field. These journals communicate new research and scholarly ideas within a specific discipline. Articles in scholarly journals are written by experts and researchers within specific subject areas. This is evident by their credentials, which are often listed or contained in the article. For example, a researcher's name, degree, and university or professional affiliation are included within the article. Such authors are usually considered people of authority within their discipline because of their professional background and expertise. Scholarly journals are written with the assumption that readers have a certain level of knowledge about a subject area. Unlike the articles found in popular publications, scholarly articles often contain an abstract, an introduction, research methods and conclusions, as well as references or a bibliography. Examples of scholarly journals include Nature, the Chaucer Review, Genocide Studies and Prevention, and Biochemical Engineering Journal. If you're not sure if a journal is scholarly, refer to Ulrich's Periodicals directory, which is available both online and in print formats. For more information, contact your instructor or professor for further clarification. Key points to remember: scholarly publications communicate research and scholarly ideas. These publications cover specific subject areas and have a narrow scope. They are written by experts and researchers within a discipline. Refer to Ulrich's Periodicals directories to find out if a journal is scholarly. For further clarification, contact your professor or campus librarian. Good luck with your research.
Okay, so that's a brief introduction to what we mean by a scholarly periodical. Now, one thing that the video didn't really go into much is the idea of a journal being peer-reviewed. So people who are faculty members at a university, in addition to teaching classes and having office hours where they meet with students, another big part of their position as a professor is doing research. And when they do research, they publish it in what are called these scholarly or academic journals. And when they do their research, you know, sometimes they'll do it on their own. Sometimes they'll collaborate with other people at the same university they work at, but oftentimes they'll also collaborate with people at other universities and even universities in other countries. So it's very international, and there's a lot of collaboration. And what happens then is once they've written an article about their research, they will submit it to a journal. And the journal doesn't just say, oh, thanks, we'll go ahead and publish this. What happens next is the journal will then send the manuscript of the article to other experts in the field who then review the article, and they'll look at the methods the authors used and the conclusions that they drew from the data and this kind of thing, and they try to determine if this is a good quality article. And when the journal sends the manuscript to the reviewers, they'll usually take off the author's names and where they work to just reduce any bias that people might have against a particular person or a particular institution where they work. And so the reviewers will send the manuscript back to the journal, then the journal will send it back to the authors, and they will then make the changes. And sometimes they may go back and forth like this several times until the journal is finally ready to be published. On occasion, they might look at a manuscript and say, this is great, you can go ahead and publish it. But oftentimes it goes back and forth in this peer review process. And so one of the advantages for you as a student or even a faculty member is if you do, when you do research, choose to use peer-reviewed articles as sources of information that you're looking at, you can be more confident in the quality of the research because other people have reviewed it and tried to make sure it's a quality article. So before we go into a database, a good idea oftentimes is to create a search strategy. And so what do we mean by this? So you might, to begin with, write a brief sentence or phrase describing your topic. And once you search in a database, you don't want to enter in the exact sentence. What you want to do then is look at the key words or the most important words in the sentence, and then also think of some other words that might be used to mean the same thing. So for example, I looked earlier at depression, so if I was looking at that and maybe I wanted to find something about dealing with depression in senior citizens, so I can use depression as one search term, but then for senior citizens I might look at words like elderly or aged or geriatric or different terms like that. So think of different words that mean similar terms, similar concepts known as synonyms. Other things to think about when you are preparing to write a paper are the requirements of the assignment, such as, of course, when is it due? We don't recommend that you wait until the night before your paper is due. Try to plan in advance. And also, your instructor may ask you to use certain types of sources. They will often ask you to use peer-reviewed journals, and so we'll look at that as well today. So, also, when we search in a database, and we'll actually demonstrate this in just a minute, a few different things that you can do. If you are searching for an exact phrase, put it in quotation marks. We don't recommend, as I said, entering a whole sentence and putting that in quotation marks. Just maybe a brief phrase like senior citizen or something like that. Put it in quotation marks. Now, every database that we look at, when we look at the advanced search feature, will give us what are called the Boolean operators. So that's kind of a weird word. It actually came from a guy's name. He was Sir George Boole, who lived, I think, in the 1700s. And what this really means are different ways you can expand or narrow the search results that you're getting. So these are and, or not. And so actually, if we are combining similar concepts, we use the word or, and we combine similar concepts with or, and that's going to find every one of those. And then we can create a narrower group by using the word and. And when you search in a database, there will be boxes that combine these different terms, and we'll see that in just a moment. One that's used not as frequently is not. and be careful if you use that one, but that will allow you to search for a concept but exclude a certain subset of the concept. If you remember back in elementary school, they use those Venn diagrams, and Venn diagrams are actually a way to visually illustrate these concepts. Another thing you can do is use what is called truncation, or also sometimes called wildcards. And so truncation means you can take the stem of a word and add a symbol to it. So in PsycInfo that we'll be looking at, it uses an asterisk. So if I took the word stem of parent and added the asterisk, it'll bring up not only parent, but parents, parental, parenting, and so forth. And a wildcard is when you use a symbol in the middle of a word. And so if we see an example here of WOM asterisk N would find both women or woman. And this can also be used if you're looking at a word like humor or color, which is spelled differently in the American or British spelling, and the British use a U in those words, and so you can put that in as well. And then finally, a really important one that we'll be focusing on, and we looked at this a little bit in the library's catalog earlier, is filtering the results. And this could include things like applying a date range, or if we're looking at articles about psychological experiments, the type of methodology, the population that's being used, and so forth. So that will also narrow your results down. So now we'll go to PsycInfo. So we're going back to the library's website here. Now we'll go into databases. So you'll notice I can type in a database if I know the title. I can also go to Browse Databases, and this will list various databases. So the one we're going to focus on today is called PsycInfo. But the thing I wanted to mention as I scroll down this list to get to PsycInfo is there's a few similar ones. And I wanted to mention the difference between these. So there's one called PsycNet, but what PsycNet really is the platform that includes these other databases. So one of them is called PsycArticles. PsycArticles allows us to search for journal articles, but only ones really that are published by the American Psychological Association. So that's just one publisher. Everything in it does have the full text, so that's a nice feature of it. But it's a smaller set of information. The main one that we're going to be looking at today is PsycInfo. So that one also includes journal articles published by the American Psychological Association, but it also includes a lot of other publishers. And so there are major scholarly publishers, like some of them are Springer, Elsevier, Wiley, and these also have thousands of different scholarly journals, including many about psychology, neuroscience, and related topics. So that's what we're looking at. Oh, the other one I wanted to mention is PsycTest. So PsycTest is a database that will help you find things like psychological test measures and scales, but it's only the ones that were included primarily in journal articles or that were developed as part of a journal article. So just so you know, you won't be able to go on this and find the kinds of tests that are used by professional clinical psychologists, such as the MMPI or that kind of thing, and try to analyze yourself or your friends, because those are limited to licensed professionals. So those kind of things won't be in there, but there are a lot of measurements that you can look at in there as well. So that's PsycTest. Let's go into PsycInfo. That's what we want to focus on today. And so when we go into PsycInfo, it is taking us into an advanced search. So let's say I wanted to look at the concept maybe of attachment, and I have to spell it correctly or I'll get no results. Oops. Okay, so there's attachment, and you'll notice that below that it does bring up other concepts like attachment behavior, attachment bond disorders, and so forth. Let's just begin with the word attachment and see how many results we get. Wow, 45,211. So we want to look at ways to narrow the search down. So the first thing I want to do is maybe look at add some additional concepts to my search. And you could look at some of the results that are presented here to think of additional words to narrow this down. So we see some of these deal with children, parents, and so forth. So I'm going to go back, and what I'm going to do here is instead of using the back arrow, I'm going to click on Edit Search. And here I'm going to add child. And remember, we talked about truncation a moment ago. So if I add that little asterisk to the end, it's going to bring up not only child, but children and children's and child's and that kind of thing. So let's see what we get here. It'll still be a lot, 23,000, but it's less than 40. So this is how we can begin narrowing our search down. Now, another way we can narrow our search down is over on the side here. So it may be that our instructor has asked us to use a certain number of peer-reviewed journals. So if we select those, so out of these 23,488, we notice that it'll give us the number that are peer-reviewed journals over here. So that's narrowing our search down even more. Now, there are some other things below here as well. And so I might want to look at age group. And so if I go to age group, it'll give me some options. So here I might want to be concerned with the broader search is childhood, which goes from birth to 12 years. Maybe I'm interested in school-age children, which would be 6 to 12 years. So let's select that. So we've cut our search down further now to 2,845. Now, another way I can narrow the search down is by the date. And so in order to do that, I want to go back to Edit the Search. And you'll notice that on the screen here, I have an option where I could say a date range. And maybe I want to go back, let's say about 10 years. So this would eliminate anything older. And I'll click on Search here. And so this will narrow our search further. And here's our search results. Now, another thing we could do is search within these results if we wanted to. And you'll notice that as I scroll down the page, the keywords that we entered in our search are highlighted in yellow. So you can continue adding concepts by going back and editing the search and adding additional concepts. But what I'd like to do now is just take a moment here and maybe look at one of these. So you'll notice this first one is telling us the title. It says it's a journal article. And then below us, it's giving us some other information. So these are the authors of the article, the name of the journal, with the volume, the issue number, and so forth. So what I'm going to do here is click on Abstract. So many databases will give you an abstract. PsycInfo years ago was actually called Psychological Abstracts. But the abstract is giving you kind of a one-paragraph summary of what the article's about. And I recommend reading that first. And then you can decide, well, is this one worth reading the whole thing? And then if I wanted to read the entire article, I have an option to view the PDF. And we can see this is a 16-page article, and it's giving us the whole thing. Let me go back to the results again. Now, another thing I wanted to mention that is often of a lot of interest to psychology majors and psychology professors is the type of methodology that was used in the article. So if I click on methodology, you can see that there are different kinds of items listed here. And oftentimes, professors will ask you to use an empirical study or a quantitative study versus something like a case study, where a case study might just look at one or a few subjects, versus an empirical study will usually have a control group and as well as a group of subjects. And so these are often considered to be a higher level of research. So we can limit by those as well. And these are just ways we can continue narrowing our search down. So I did want to mention that as well. Methodology is another way to narrow the search. Okay, so I'm running a little short on time. A couple of other things I wanted to mention here is that you can create an account in PsycInfo or PsycNet in general. And in order to do that, you'd want to go to here where it says log in. And then if you haven't used this before, you want to go to where it says not registered, and you can create an account. You want to be sure to use your FAU email in here. And once you create an account, you can do things like save your search results. And you can also, you notice this little icon that looks like a bell. It says set email alert. And so this is especially useful if you're a graduate student or faculty member. You can then save a search and ask PsycInfo to send you any new results that have come up in that search periodically. So you can maybe do it once a month or every few weeks, and you'll get an update with any new articles entered under your subject of choice. So a couple of other things I want to mention briefly. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. So PsycNet we talked about. A couple of other databases that the library provides to you that are especially useful to graduate students include the ProQuest Dissertations and Theses Global. So if you're doing a literature review for a master's thesis or PhD dissertation, this is very useful to look at to see if any similar graduate work has been done beforehand. Secondly, there's a database called Web of Science. And Web of Science includes several different databases, including Science Citation Index, Social Sciences Citation Index, and Arts and Humanities. So depending on your topic, you might want to search for all three. If you're looking for something like neuroscience, the Science Citation might be more useful. Social psychology, the Social Sciences Citation Index could be more useful. But the point I wanted to make here is if you search for a subject in these databases in the Web of Science, you can sort your results by the number of times the items have been cited by other authors. So this gives us a measure of how influential a particular article is. And so when you are doing your search, you may want to find out which articles have been most useful pertaining to this subject. And citing your sources, you want to use the APA format, and when you include information from an article in your subject, you want to always properly paraphrase it and always cite your sources. On that psychology research guide that we saw under the research guides on our website, there's one of the tabs there says APA citations, and if you go in there, there's a lot of information, including a whole nother workshop called the APA Bootcamp. We have the video of that up, of that workshop, like this one will be up also. And if you go into that, you can get a lot of detail about citing according to the APA format. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and send them to us on the Facebook Messenger at this time. We don't have much time left, so please go ahead and send your questions now, and Christy will relay them to me, and I will try to answer them. Anything coming through? So apparently no questions are coming through on Facebook. So finally, if you need help, again, on our library's website, there's a link up at the top that says Ask a Librarian. And we have people there from FAU every afternoon, Monday through Friday from 1 to 5 that you can chat with online. But if you're not available to contact us during those times, we are there in the office Monday through Friday between 8 a.m. and 7 Monday through Thursday and 6 on Friday. So you can give us a call there. The phone number's on our library's website. And also, there are people available to chat with you at other hours. So they're really there until midnight, Sunday through Thursday. and they have access to our resources and can help you that way. You can also make a request for a consultation, and there's a link there. A consultation means that I or another one of our librarians can meet one-on-one with you to assist with your research. The library does offer a variety of social media platforms, and you can keep up with events that are happening at the library as workshops and other things that we have. We have fun events too, like Donuts with the Dean, and you can hear about those through our social media. And finally, there is an online certificate of completion, and the link is available there. And I'll leave that up for a moment so you can write that down, and you can take the quiz and get a certificate of completion. Or if you're viewing the recording, you'll still be able to get that as well. And the recording of this will be available on the library's website. Christy, have any questions come through? So no questions have come through. So we thank you for attending. If you're viewing this live, or if you've viewed the recording of this after the fact, thank you for attending the workshop. And we hope to see you here on the library. Or again, if you're even a distance learner, you can contact us online or by phone. So thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your day. Bye. Stop streaming.